Hey, welcome to the Virtually Speaking podcast. My name is Pete Fletcher, and my co-host John Nicholson and I went to VMware Explore a few weeks ago, and we had some great conversations with some customers, partners, and VMware execs. We'll be sharing those conversations throughout the next couple of weeks, but this week we want to share a conversation we had with the Australian Securities Exchange, or ASX. Now, ASX is Australia's primary securities exchange and is among the world's top exchanges. I mean, with between $5 and $6 trillion in equity and fixed income assets. They provide listing, trading, clearing and settlement services, plus an array of technology and post-trade services. And so at VMware Explore, John and I spoke to their CIO, Dan Chesterman, about how they're using VMware Blockchain for their clearing and settlement system replacement project, as well as a brand new service offering. Enjoy.
Good afternoon and welcome to the Virtually Speaking podcast. My name is Pete Fletcher, a.k.a. Pedro Arrow, and joining me once again is Mr. John Nicholson. John, how you doing, buddy?
You know, this has been a great week, but I need some vacation after this, and I just want to go somewhere really far away. I just want to get on a plane and go as far as is humanly possible.
Oh, boy. That's exciting. There's a lot of places you could go, man. Where are you thinking?
Maybe down under. Maybe
down under?
Yeah.
Well, John, you are not only the king of corny segues, but you're in luck because we have the CIO of ASX. His name is Dan Chesterman. He was actually on the keynote today with Kit, and he's going to talk to us today. Dan, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, guys. Nice to be here.
So, down under, good? You like it there? Sydney's, guys?
It's very nice, although I was just saying there's no short flights from Sydney, so everywhere we go is a long flight.
Absolutely. So Dan, I did get a chance to catch a little bit of the keynote, and you were talking a little bit about how you're taking advantage of VMware's blockchain, but let's back up a little bit and talk a little bit about ASX. For those that don't know, what is ASX, and how do you guys contribute to society in general?
Sure. So ASX is Australia's leading financial market. We offer a very wide range of services, including listing, trading, clearing, and settlement for a number of different asset classes, like equities, derivatives, fixed income, energy, and commodities. But beyond just being an exchange, there's a separate part of the business, which is what I'm actually accountable for, which is technology and data. And so in technology, we actually commercialize our data center, so the Australian Liquidity Center. Our customers put their equipment in our data center in order to be close to our matching engine or to be interconnected with each other. We also run a virtual private network called ASX Net, and our customers use that to connect to Australia's financial markets from either domestic or international points of presence. And then on the data side, we've got a wide range of data products, including obviously market data and pricing feeds and order books and things like this. But also increasingly, we're starting to look at whether we can actually make a data science as a service platform. So that's really where we actually see a lot of potential and a lot of growth, if you like, because there is, underpinning exchanges, lots and lots of data, and much of it has not yet seen the light of day.
Well, so this is interesting because, obviously, being an exchange, you help broker the, sale of these commodities, but you're also generating data, which people historically try to subscribe, get a faster ticker, back in the day tape or modems or dialing in, and then you kind of become an ISP from that, it sounds like, from a connectivity and peering and people wanting to get closer for, frequency of trading and things like that. But, rather than just service them the data, actually help manipulate the data and drive it into that. What are some of the typical markets that are looking for that?
Well, so there's a wide range of different kind of customers. So you're right, there's some customers that really do prioritize low latency and having their equipment close to the matching engine, and that's one subset. But increasingly, we're actually also seeing that some customers use our infrastructure or come into our data center, not necessarily to connect directly with the exchange, but potentially to connect with each other.
Okay, so they're already going to have to be there for other reasons, so they might as well, banks might as well just do settlement and other things between each other.
And then also they might wind up saying, if we've got to have a presence within the ALC, we might actually also put other parts of our local needs in that same. So we have some strategic customers who will take a cage and have their whole data center within our hall.
Yeah. Well, I mean, data has gravity, and so if you already have to be there for one source of truth in data, and then there's things that are chained off of that. The nature of one data warehouse always tends to spawn another analytics platform or thing next to it.
Totally, and that's the way that we think about what we provide is open infrastructure that our customers find valuable as long as we can actually, demonstrate a good total cost of ownership.
No, that's fun. So
good and interesting business, and not necessarily what people naturally.
Absolutely, it blew my mind. I've never seen, a stock. I just think about the New York Stock Exchange, and I'm trying to imagine them running this similar type of business.
Well, a lot of the exchanges do globally have low latency. What we've been, I suppose, a little bit more open with is the idea that actually there's a whole ecosystem which you can build around this, and I think that's something that's really valuable to think about.
So can you share a little bit about your digital transformation initiatives that you have going on?
Sure, and maybe the best way to structure this is make 3 legs to the tech strategy.
Okay.
The first is tech transformation, and that's really about modernizing a lot of the platforms and systems that we use. And we started with a real focus on the equity stack, so the systems that support our equity business, and that included upgrading our trading platform, upgrading all of the systems that we use to take the data off the trading platform and share it with other systems within the exchange, but also with our customers. And some of those were like 25 or 30-year-old ETLs that we're now replacing with microservices that we're putting on a Kubernetes-based platform with Kafka and Spring Boot. So it's a real modernization of the data dissemination and enrichment capability. There's another project which we're in the midst of, and we're working closely with VMware on, which is the replacement of chess. Chess is a very significant system in the context of Australian financial markets because it was implemented originally in 1994, 96, that sort of era. It was a very, very important system because it allowed us in 1998 as a country to dematerialize equities. So we don't actually have share certificates stored in a vault like you have in some of the markets, including quite progressive markets.
I feel like there's no bearer bonds or equivalent or anything like that.
There's essentially a record on chess, which is the system that ASX operates. For everyone that has a broker-sponsored holding, you will also have a holder identification number, which is your unique identifier, and you'll get a certificate of your balance from your broker, but also from chess, which is the...
Oh, wow. So if I've got accounts with 5 different financial institutions, there's still one set of records across that.
You may, in that context, have more than one holder identification number, so you might still get 5 certificates, but recently sort of modernized those, and you can consolidate holdings onto one HIN.
Well, but that also makes it one potential API or point to go tap and then look at data from a more holistic standpoint.
So the chess has been important, I think, for all those reasons, but the reality is, being as aged as it is, it's a COBOL-based system that operates on Itanium servers. So over time, we did want to modernize it. It sits at the center of this sort of ecosystem, and it is the source of truth for your holdings, for any broker-sponsored holdings, and that includes your name, your address, your details.
So I also love particularly in finance, you talk about this being COBOL, the age of applications.
Yeah,
sure.
And it's, it's like, okay, it's once every 2 decades we get to refactor this. So, and you don't necessarily want to rush into it because, maybe there's that next new shiny thing around the corner, but what are you looking to re-platform towards with this?
So it's very, there's no rushing, that's one thing I'd say for sure. But we did take the view that actually it was worth exploring whether DLT or distributed ledger technology would actually be helpful for not just on day one, but actually providing infrastructure upon which the industry can innovate over the next 10, 15, even 20 years. And so we started this project a number of years ago with really this ambition to create infrastructure, the next generation of financial markets infrastructure.
Wow, so this will be it's not just a new database, or it's not just an upgrade, or it's not just a little more scalable. This is going to be a platform for other innovation to come onto.
So the way I think about it is we've got a number of participants who connected to us. Today, in the current chess paradigm, we provide messages back and forth. It's a proprietary set of chess messages which is used by the ecosystem to stay in sync, if you like. But of course, message-based integration isn't perfect. Everyone's actually caching locally their own version of all that data.
Of course, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, and maybe they're having side discussions and then trying to do a settlement later or something.
I think the reality is what happens is there's a degree of reconciliation. There is the risk of reconciliation breaks. There's also just a degree of latency that's inherent in that system. Plus, if there's a new regulatory requirement, everyone has to then apply it in their own context. The idea behind the Chess Replacement Project is we put in place a platform which allows for customers to connect in whichever way they choose. They can still use messages if that's what they like. And I think on day one, a lot of them we'll modernize the message set from the proprietary messages, which has existed before, to ISO 20022, and that'll be familiar to many of the global custodians of banks and brokers that we connect to. But they'll also have the option for one or many of their flows to actually use smart contracts and direct integration. So each of them will, in the background, have a node offered as a service by us so that they can actually start to think about multi-party workflows and multi-party applications that are powered by smart contracts. Now, our vision is that we won't necessarily be the company with the organization building all of the applications. We certainly build chess, that's our application, and that stores in it all the rules associated with listing and with clearing and settlement in Australia. But another application could be built, for example, for internal deal approval for employees, buying shares or selling shares, or maybe a rights issue, or maybe an account hierarchy application that could be used to, make it more efficient, if you like, to have those sorts of structures. And ultimately, that's what we see our role to be. As a financial market infrastructure, we put in place systems and infrastructure which allow the ecosystem to, over time, reduce cost and friction and risk. And that's just an example of it.
Okay. So blockchain DLT-as-a-service. Tell me a little bit about the motivation behind that.
So as we were doing this work, we found that we were spending a lot of time with customers, or even not direct customers, but people that we might interact with, who wanted to understand a little bit about what ASX was up to, what is a DLT, and how could it potentially be applied. And what we arrived at is actually that any ecosystem that exists where there are multiple parties that want to share data, but they want to also preserve privacy, and they want to be able to operate at scale and at the necessary throughput.
Is privacy important in the finance? Oh, okay.
I think so, yeah.
All right.
But it's actually it's important in lots of different contexts. So we came up with the idea actually of DLT as a service, meaning if you wanted to build a multi-party application in Australia, many of the people who might be part of that ecosystem are probably part of our existing customer set.
It's kind of like the hosting thing earlier. Well, we're already there. We might as well just talk while we're here.
Yeah. We've already made a set of technology choices, including DAML on VMware Blockchain, which have been built to meet the exacting standards of an exchange, clearing, and settlement system. That's probably a superset of the requirements that smaller applications might require. And what that means is that the application developer and the ecosystem can much more quickly get to actually building a multi-party application, rather than starting by setting up a consortium, going through tech due diligence, agreeing on a model and how we're going to operate this.
This kind of reminds me of some of the discussions about why customers are wanting to do a cloud or wanting to go to these platform as a service systems. It's let someone who's a grown up who knows what they're doing take care of the physical or the lower levels, and let me choose to engage at the point of innovation. It sounds like you're kind of providing a highly stable, well-respected platform for them to build on.
That's a good way to put it, is that we're trying to help customers get more quickly to business value, which actually comes at the innovation and the application level. And so we've got a number of different customers working on different use cases, and maybe one I've described, which I think is a great example of the sort of stuff that could be done, which is quite different to financial markets. KPMG, working in conjunction with the New South Wales Office of the Building Commissioner, has created an application called the Property Trustworthiness Indicator. And what this does is stores all of the data associated with the materials and the processes used in the construction of a residential apartment building. And then, using an algorithm that's been created by the Western Sydney University, they come up with a trust score, which changes over time if you maintain the building. And it can be used to give you a sense of, essentially, had this been built to code with the materials of the right quality? Have they been installed in the right way?
Who are the contractors involved? And you can adjust the scores of like, oh, it turns out those guys did a good job, or those guys, does that engineering firm, or who all was well touched. Is this going to help in terms of like for the property market, or building, borrowing against, or other activities against it? Or
well, so the idea behind it is that obviously in that ecosystem you've got a number of different people who might have a need for that integration. That could be the bank, it could be the insurer, it could be the investor, it could be...
How flammable is this? I mean, no, you can store all that stuff.
Flammability is a really interesting one. So there is actually a project that the government is running called Project Remediate, which is aiming to improve some buildings which were built with more flammable cladding.
Yeah.
They're going to ask that all of those buildings get their materials placed in this application, and if they are, then the Insurance Council of Australia has said they would not charge them the flammable, like the extra premium that they were going to be charged for having that.
Well, insurance is something that, at least for in the States, if it's on, my house or a car, it's real simple. If it's some large commercial structure, someone's going to come out there and kick the building and do these things, and, trying to get 3 bids that, appropriately try to tie the value of the cost of that property to that, without dealing with a bunch of MGAs and other, there's just all these middlemen that magically appear the second you get beyond commercial insurance. But this should allow much more automated, much more transparent, hopefully lower cost, or at least appropriately assign risk.
Totally, and that's really the idea. If I think about the role we play in financial markets, is we run infrastructure and we provide very, very reliable and trusted data.
Yep.
Yeah.
That can actually be applied to any data exchange.
Well, and I like the idea of partnering with the government, where it's part of, the people who are already needing to collect this stuff, but no, it's no longer getting buried in a basement. It's in a place where they can access it in a reliable and trustworthy way.
And it will take time for all of the firms to, if you like, digitize their process and be able to feed this application. That won't happen immediately because there's all sorts of different scale. But a couple of the large building contractors, have actually been part of this initiative as well. And that was the other key point I wanted to highlight is when you start to think about these multi-party applications, which is actually, I think, what enterprise blockchains can support, you really do need to start to collaborate and co-innovate. And so that project, the Property Trustworthiness Indicator, led by KPMG, Office of the Building Commissioner doing a fantastic job with the requirements. Mervac, who's one of the big contractors, was part of the pilot group. Microsoft, VMware, Digital Asset, and AWS, all involved in creating something which couldn't have been created by one of those parties by themselves.
Yeah.
Oh wow, this is getting, it's a whole ecosystem.
It's collaboration. Yeah.
So that's the first application that's live, and then other ones we're looking at, or customers of ours are actually in different stages of development and testing on, include a private equity register, a system for the administration of superannuation, which is basically the equivalent of your 401k, so retirement saving schemes. There is a shares trading app, there's a share repo agreement application, so there's a number of different applications.
Being able to centralize that would be great, because if you've ever had a couple jobs in this country, you end up with like multiple 401ks and islands, and you have to manually go move stuff and call people and paper, so they mail you a check. It's kind of a barbaric process compared to the streamlinedness I'm sure you'd be able to deliver.
You could imagine, and that's really what it will take time for whole ecosystems to be replatformed, and none of this is going to be quick, but you can see in that sort of the space where potentially there are new asset classes that haven't ever really been traded liquidly. So that's sort of the promise potentially of this future.
So how does VMware Blockchain and even multi-cloud play into all this for you guys?
So the VMware blockchain has been really important because ultimately, as an exchange, we have very, very high requirements for things like performance, scalability, recoverability, customer support, customer success. So working with the VMware team, obviously they've been able to apply a really high level of engineering competence to the project, but also a very strong product mindset. So we work together on what the roadmap looks like. We're obviously providing a lot of the early, but not the only source of requirements. And you can see that the product roadmap will evolve over time and continue to add new features which will unlock ultimately new business opportunities. And then finally, there has just been the spirit of collaborative co-creation, which has been really central to this initiative. And we see the relationship for us, therefore, developing from just a customer-supplier relationship to be more co-creating and partnering and even going to market together.
Very nice, very nice. Last question for you before we let you go. VMware Explore has just been filled with great announcements, great sessions. Any takeaways from you this week? Any good conversations you've had? Any sessions that you've attended?
I think there are some really interesting parts of what the keynote covered yesterday. I think vSphere version 8 is obviously a really important development, one that we'll be watching. I think the emphasis on multi-cloud is really relevant. Everyone knows that we'll never be able to rely purely on one cloud.
Right.
So I think most firms are trying to work out and navigate how native do you be with each separate one, and any approaches and that help organizations with that, I think people will definitely evaluate and try and look at. And then the emphasis on improving the developer experience. That's the other key thing, and I think something that we all need to, as technology divisions, focus on, because that's actually how you retain and get good talent doing good work.
Well said, well said. Well, Dan, thank you so much for joining Virtually Speaking, and open door policy. If you ever want to come back on, we really appreciate it.
Thanks, guys. Enjoy the chat.